Hi, my name is Lívia Araújo. I am a bachelor student from the course of Library Sciences in the Federal University of the State of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and I'm going to present the work called Open Educational Resources in Health Sciences, Best Practices for its Application in the Whole of Libraries. The main topics that is going to be discussed in this presentation is the introduction, our purposes, our methods, the results, and the conclusion. For the beginning, we brought to you, a short timeline of facts that marks the history of OER. The first one was the Forum on the Impact of Open Courseware for Higher Education in Developing Countries that occurred in 2002, where the term open educational resources was used publicly for the first time to classify the digital tools used as a didactic contribution to the structures that were being developed in higher education courses on distance learning modality. The second one is the Cape Town Declaration for Open Education on 2007, followed by the Dakar Declaration on Open Educational Resources on 2009. The first open or the first World OER Congress occurred in 2012 that brought to us the plan with 10 actions for promoting the international use of open resources in the global education structure. After that, we had the Ljubljana Action Plan on 2017, where researchers, librarians, parents, teachers, educational advisors, administrators at various levels were called upon to create and promote the dissemination of OER. Here in Brazil, we had as the first mark for the implementation of OER the Oportunidade Project, financed with the assistance of the European Union to insert in Brazil a network of Latin American universities engaged in open educational practices. After that, we had the Ordinance number 300 of April 19, 2016, which defined the criteria and procedures for the reception, evaluation, and distribution of open or free digital educational resources. It aimed at basic education in official programs and platforms of the Ministry of Education. In the same year were established the Ordinance number 183 on October 2016 from CAPES, which established that the educational resources developed from the offered scholarships should be disclosed in open licensing, giving the authors the due credit for authorship in the modality declared by themselves within the Creative Commons models. For the libraries, in the first World OER Congress, they had presented a panel oriented to the actions of libraries and their professionals in the scope of OER development. Among the actions of this panel, we highlighted the instructional actions in programs of competence in information use OER. The Lund University Libraries made a project to develop open educational resources for information literacy. Its strategy sought to develop small resources that could be used by teachers according to their needs in a specific teaching context or on or off campus. The Scholarly Publishing and Academic Resources Coalition, SPARC, made two action fronts: the Open Educational Leadership Program and the SPARC Forum for Libraries and OER, LibOER. The first is an intensive training program to provide librarians with the knowledge, skills, and connections that prepare them to act on the movement's initiatives in favor of open education. As for the forum, it is a collaborative community of practices that mediates the dialogue between librarians and researchers interested in open education. The purpose of our research is to discuss the knowledge, use, and promotion of open educational resources in the Brazilian health science libraries, with a specific means to contextualize the study and the use of open educational resources in Brazil, investigate the application of OER in the Brazilian health science libraries, and suggest good practices for the production, use, and management of OER in these libraries, pointing out how the librarian professional can assist his users in assessing and effectively using these resources. The methods used to embase this research were mainly bibliographic materials, documents, and research data collected from a questionnaire. In the research, we selected in the database in Information Science (BRAPT), Scientific Electronic Library Online (Cielo), and the Library and Information Science Abstract (LISA), documents that could define what are open educational resources, how are they used, how are they classified, etc. For that, we used the following search strategy, as you can see over here. The data collected were the data collected came from the institutional repositories of federal higher education institutions in Brazil. We investigated them to verify the existence of educational resources in their catalogs, on which we discovered that 8% of them doesn't have any type of open educational resources in their repositories, and only 12% of them have some type of OER classified without a consensus as to the term adopted to name it and/or a standard categorization for these resources within the collections in which they appear. Secondly, to investigate the public and private university libraries serving the Brazilian medicine and biomedicine courses, we, we made a questionnaire to be applied with the responsible librarians of these libraries to illustrate the current situation of open educational resources in those libraries and to understand how has it been treated for them. To draw a profile of the respondents, we chose to highlight the origin of their workplace as a particular characteristic. We didn't ask any personal information, only this. 61% of them worked in university libraries, 16% worked in hospital libraries, and 12% of them were linked to different institutions in the public service. When asked about if they have known or had contact with open educational resources, the majority of them, 70%, said yes, and only 25% of them said no. Most of the respondents said that they know what open educational resources means, as you can see in this graphic. We asked them about the types of OER that they use, and the following were highlighted: training, manuals, articles, and or digital learning books and video lessons, in addition to presenting templates, lectures, teaching projects, short courses, etc. Those other parts were on the short answers, so we didn't put in the graphic. The total of librarians with OER in their collections were 8%. When asked about the management of the OER in their library, we noticed that only 50% of the responders said that the open educational resources is registered in the library digital catalog. 30% said that they doesn't have any open educational resources, and 20% of them said they don't register the open educational resources that they have in the catalog. The responsibility of doing such thing is mostly in the hands of the librarian, but a short part of them said that the author is the responsible to register the OER in the catalog. Those open educational resources are mainly kept in the institutional repository. A short part of them are kept in a learning object repository specifically, and the shortest amount of responders said that they have no specific location to keep the resources. The librarians answered that the public to whom those resources are intended are directed to the internal community and to external public, as well as to students, teachers, internal residents, and members of the clinical staff of the institution and or affiliated parts. About the registration of the open educational resources in the catalog, we asked them if they use any kind of metadata on the record of those resources. The mainly part said that they have not used any kind of metadata, and a little short amount said that they have used metadata, totalizing 45%. The, the types of used metadata is presented in here. They don't have any specific metadata to describe the open educational resources. So they use Dublin Core, SCORM, the MARC format, and the LILDBI methodology through an administrative form. As for the licensing, of the resources or the way that they make the OER available, we could see that 54% of the responders said that they keep the open educational resources in open access with download and reuse allowed. 22% said the said that the resources are kept in open access, but the download and reuse are restricted to members of the institution. 18% of them said they keep open access and restricted download, and only 4.5% showed that they keep those resources according to the author's license. Other relevant information. We asked them about their perceptions on how they can use their ability to manage and if they feel like these resources are some way relevant to the development of knowledge and learning autonomy for those who use them. So, in the first question, we asked, do you consider that you have adequate knowledge to use and share OER? Most of them said yes or yes somehow. When asked if they feel they that they have the ability to manage OER, most of them said yes. About the relevance, the majority of respondents agreed that the OER are very relevant to the development of knowledge. They also responded some ways of promoting actions for the dissemination of the open educational resources they keep, as for example, by conversation, by meetings, webinars, lectures, sending actualized messages by email for the researchers, and of course, using them on the distance courses. Conclusion. We find out with those answers that the librarians must be better trained in the treatment of OER, not only to keep those resources in the libraries, but to know about the specific metadata, to know about the classification, to better put them into the world, to be found by the researchers that need them, or the teachers, the students, etc. We need to think about an adequate infrastructure to store and disseminate these resources, not only in the institutional repositories. Maybe if we can create a standardized repository to learning objects, it will be such a great thing, especially for the federal universities or for the public universities in general here in Brazil that doesn't have much contact with these resources that could help them to improve the, the knowledge process. We need to create best internal policies for the OER management. And more than everything, we need to create a direct dialogue with the academic community to better understand their needs. That's it. Here is our reference from our work. You can contact us on our emails for more information. This work was oriented by the Professor and Dr. Daiane da Silva Prudencio, and you also can contact her to more information about open educational resources. Thank you very much.